I woke up to the sound of heavy machinery tearing apart 15 years of my life's work. The HOA president stood there watching with a smirk as contractors destroyed the dam that had saved 23 homes from flooding, all because I refused to pay her made-up $847 monthly fees for protecting their own neighborhood. Patricia thought she'd finally gotten rid of the stubborn old engineer who wouldn't bow down to her fake authority. But what she didn't know was that I had every permit, every safety report, and every piece of evidence proving my dam was completely legal. And in 48 hours, when that flash flood warning became reality, she was about to learn exactly why you don't mess with a hydrologist who's been outsmarting water for 40 years. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment, because this justice story hits different when Mother Nature gets involved. And if you believe no HOA tyrant should ever get away with destroying something that protects families, hit subscribe, because you won't want to miss how karma floods back to bite them. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in October, delivered by a postal worker who made me sign for it like I was receiving nuclear launch codes. I knew it was trouble the moment I saw the return address: Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association, urgent, legal notice. We'd lived in this neighborhood for 23 years, and I'd never seen an HOA letter marked urgent about anything more serious than Christmas decoration deadlines. I poured my coffee and sat at the kitchen table where Sarah and I used to read the morning paper together. The chair across from me stayed empty now, had been empty for 2 years since the cancer took her, but I still made coffee for 2 out of habit. The letter felt heavy in my hands, heavier than paper should feel. When I tore it open, the words hit me like a punch to the gut. Notice of violation and mandatory infrastructure maintenance fees. Your unauthorized water management structure requires immediate compliance payment of $847. Monthly beginning November 1st. $847. Monthly. For the dam Sarah and I built 15 years ago, I had to read it 3 times before it sank in. They were calling my retention dam an unauthorized water management structure and demanding I pay them nearly $1,000 every month for the privilege of keeping it on my own property. The letter was signed by Patricia Kellerman, HOA president, a name I didn't recognize. It included a bunch of legal-sounding nonsense about community aesthetic standards and liability risks, and gave me 30 days to comply or face all available legal remedies. My hands were shaking, and it wasn't from the coffee. This dam wasn't just some weekend project I'd thrown together. Sarah and I had watched Hurricane Isabel flood half our neighborhood back in 2003. The Chens lost everything in their basement. The Martinez family had to gut their first floor. Old Mr. Peterson's garage collapsed from the water damage. 23 homes got hit, and the damage totals ran into the millions. Sarah was the one who suggested we do something about it. "Frank," she'd said, watching our neighbors haul waterlogged furniture to the curb, "you spent 30 years with the Army Corps of Engineers. You know how to stop this." So I did what any reasonable hydrologist would do. I designed a small earthen retention dam for the natural low point on our property, where the neighborhood drainage naturally collected. Nothing fancy, just good engineering. I got the permits from the county, had the soil composition tested, brought in clean fill dirt, and built it right. The county inspector signed off on it. The whole project cost us $12,000 and 3 months of weekend work. That dam had been protecting our neighborhood ever since. During the 2011 storms, it held back thousands of gallons of runoff that would have flooded the same 23 houses. Same thing during the 2018 flash floods and again last spring. I kept detailed records because that's what engineers do. Water levels, rainfall data, calculated flow rates. By my math, that little dam had prevented at least $2.3 million in flood damage over the years. And now, some HOA president I'd never heard of wanted me to pay her association $847 every month for the privilege of protecting my neighbors' homes. I walked out to look at the dam, coffee mug in hand. It sat quiet and solid in the morning sun, exactly the way Sarah and I had designed it. Grass growing on the slopes, a few wildflowers she'd planted along the edges. It looked like it belonged there because it did belong there. On our property, built with our money, protecting our community. The phone book still had Patricia Kellerman listed on Elm Street, 3 blocks over. I'd never seen her at neighborhood barbecues or block parties, but then again, we hadn't had many of those since Sarah passed. I dialed the number and got an answer on the second ring. Patricia Kellerman. Miss Kellerman, this is Frank Morrison over on Maple Street. I got your letter about my retention dam. Oh good, Mr. Morrison. I was hoping you'd call. That structure of yours is a real concern for the community. We need to discuss immediate compliance. Her voice had that fake sweet tone people use when they're trying to sell you something you don't want. Ma'am, I'm not sure what compliance you're talking about. That dam is fully permitted and legal. Has been for 15 years. Well, Mr. Morrison, things change. The HOA board has determined that your unauthorized construction violates our community standards and creates liability issues. The monthly fees will help offset our increased insurance costs. Unauthorized? I have the county permits right here in my files. Want to see them? Mr. Morrison, I think you're confused about the authority structure here. The HOA supersedes individual property owner decisions when they affect community welfare. Your dam is an eyesore and a safety hazard. We've had complaints. That's when I knew I was dealing with someone who had no idea what she was talking about. Ma'am, what's your background in hydrology or civil engineering? Long pause. I don't think my qualifications are relevant here. What's relevant is HOA compliance. And what exactly are these monthly fees paying for? Infrastructure maintenance, safety inspections, liability insurance, standard fees for community water management. I almost laughed. She wanted me to pay her nearly $1,000 a month to maintain a dam I'd built and maintain myself for 15 years. Miss Kellerman, I maintain that dam myself. It doesn't need your inspections or your insurance. Mr. Morrison, you have 30 days to comply. If you choose not to cooperate, we'll pursue all legal remedies. I really hope we can resolve this amicably. The line went dead. I stared at the phone for a minute, then walked back out to look at my dam. Our dam. The one that had saved 23 families from flood damage year after year. 30 days to pay. Patricia Kellerman, $847. For the right to keep protecting my neighbors. I poured the rest of my coffee on Sarah's wildflowers and went inside to find my permit files. I hired Tom Brennan, the same attorney who'd handled Sarah's estate. Tom had practiced law in our county for 32 years and knew every judge, every clerk, and every trick in the book. When I showed him Patricia's letter and my permit files, he just shook his head and smiled. Frank, this is the dumbest HOA overreach I've seen in decades. Your dam is completely legal, fully permitted, and she has zero authority to charge you fees for it. We'll file a counter-complaint and shut this down fast. Tom was confident, maybe too confident. He filed our response on a Friday afternoon, citing property rights, valid permits, and Patricia's complete lack of legal authority. The counter-complaint demanded she cease all collection efforts and pay my legal fees. I felt good walking out of his office. The law was on my side, the facts were on my side, and I had an experienced attorney who knew the system. Word got around the neighborhood fast. Mrs. Chen stopped by Saturday morning with homemade cookies and a check for $500. Mr. Morrison, your dam saved my basement 3 times. Let me help with the lawyer costs. The Martinez family brought over another $300. Even Jake Williams from 2 streets over, a retired police detective I barely knew, knocked on my door Sunday evening. Frank, I heard about this HOA nonsense. Patricia Kellerman's been making waves since she moved here. Count me in for whatever you need. By Monday, I had 12 neighbors offering to help pay legal costs and 3 more willing to testify about how my dam had protected their homes. I started thinking maybe Patricia had picked the wrong fight with the wrong engineer in the wrong neighborhood. Maybe this would all blow over once she realized she was outnumbered and outgunned. Tuesday morning at 6:15, I woke up to the sound of heavy machinery in my backyard. I threw on clothes and ran outside to find a yellow excavator already positioned next to my dam. 2 men in hard hats were setting up equipment, while a third man filmed everything with his phone. Patricia Kellerman stood beside a white county truck, holding a clipboard and wearing the biggest smile I'd ever seen on a human face. "What the hell is going on here?" I shouted over the engine noise. Patricia walked over, still smiling. "Good morning, Mr. Morrison. We're here for emergency removal of your dangerous structure. County condemned it yesterday afternoon." She handed me an official-looking document with a county letterhead. Emergency condemnation order. Immediate removal required. It was signed by someone named David Walsh from the county engineering department. I'd never heard of him, and I knew every engineer in that office from my 30 years of permit work. "This is impossible," I said. "I was never notified. There was no inspection. You can't just show up and tear down a legal structure." "Actually, we can. Safety emergency. Your dam poses imminent risk to public welfare." Patricia was practically giggling. "The contractors need to get started. I'd suggest you step back." I called Tom Brennan's office. Voicemail. I called the county engineering department. Transferred 3 times. Finally got someone who said David Walsh was out on site inspections and couldn't be reached. I called the sheriff's office and got Deputy Martinez, no relation to my neighbors. He showed up 20 minutes later, looked at Patricia's paperwork, and shrugged. "Looks official to me, sir. If you have a dispute with the county order, that's a civil matter. I can't stop them from following a legal condemnation. Can I at least see their permits, their insurance, something?" The contractor foreman, a big guy with tobacco stains on his teeth, just laughed. "Lady paid us to take it down. County says take it down. We're taking it down. You got a problem, call City Hall." By 9:30 that morning, 15 years of careful engineering was gone. They punched holes in the earthen walls with the excavator, then used the machine to push the whole structure into a muddy pile. Water that had been safely contained behind my dam started flowing freely toward the neighborhood storm drains, carrying mud and debris with it. I took pictures of everything. The fake county truck with no official plates. The contractors who wouldn't show valid permits. Patricia standing there filming the destruction like it was Christmas morning. I got shots of the destroyed dam, the muddy water flow, and the pile of broken earth that used to protect 23 homes. Mrs. Chen came running from her house when she heard the machinery. When she saw what they'd done, she started crying. The Martinez kids stood in their backyard staring at the mess, not understanding why someone had destroyed the thing that kept their house dry. Jake Williams showed up just as the contractors were loading their equipment. He took one look at the scene and started asking questions. "Ma'am, can I see your county ID?" he asked Patricia. "I don't need to show you anything. This is official business." "Actually, you do if you're representing county government. State law." Jake had that cop voice, the one that made you want to cooperate whether you felt like it or not. Patricia's smile finally cracked. The contractors have all the proper documentation. But when Jake asked the contractors for their permits, they suddenly got real interested in loading their truck faster. The foreman mumbled something about having permits back at the office and started up the excavator. Within 10 minutes they were gone. Patricia drove away right behind them, leaving me standing in my backyard, looking at 15 years of destroyed work. That afternoon, the Weather Service issued a flash flood watch for the next 48 hours. Hurricane Ida's remnants were moving up the coast, and they were predicting 3 to 5 inches of rain in 12 hours. I stared at the muddy pile where my dam used to be, and did the math in my head. Without that retention structure, the neighborhood drainage was going to flow straight into the storm system. 3 inches of rain would overwhelm the old pipes. 5 inches would flood every basement from Maple Street to Oak Avenue. Patricia Kellerman had just removed the only thing standing between 23 families and a disaster. And she had no idea what was coming. The rain started at 11:30 that night, exactly when the weather service said it would. I stood at my kitchen window with a cup of coffee, watching water pool in the muddy crater where my dam used to be. The coffee tasted like cardboard, but I needed something to do with my hands while I waited for the inevitable. By midnight, we had 2 inches down. The old storm drains were already backing up at the corner of Maple and Oak. I could see water creeping across Mrs. Chen's driveway in the streetlight. At 1:15, I heard the first basement sump pump kick on somewhere down the block. By 2 a.m., 3 more pumps were running, but they were fighting a losing battle. The water had nowhere to go except into people's homes. I put on my rain boots and walked out into the storm with a flashlight and measuring stick. The water flowing through my destroyed dam site was running at 8 inches deep and moving fast, carrying mud and debris straight toward the neighborhood storm system. I took measurements every 15 minutes, marking the water levels and flow rates in my notebook. 30 years of hydrology training doesn't just disappear because you retire. At 3:10 a.m., Mrs. Chen's basement flooded. I heard her screaming from across the street and ran over. She was standing in her kitchen in her nightgown, crying and pointing down the basement stairs. The water was 3 feet deep and rising, covering everything her late husband had left behind. His woodworking shop, built over 20 years of retirement, was completely underwater. Hand tools he'd brought from Taiwan in 1987, floating like dead fish. The workbench where he'd built furniture for every grandchild in the family, covered in muddy water that smelled like sewage. "Mr. Morrison," she sobbed, "all of his things, everything he made." I helped her turn off the electricity to the basement and called Jake Williams. He showed up 15 minutes later with a pump truck and 3 other neighbors who'd heard about the flooding. We spent the next 2 hours pumping water, but it kept coming back. Without my dam to hold the runoff, every drop of rain that fell on 8 blocks of neighborhood was flowing straight into the old storm system, backing up through the basement drains. The Martinez family lost both cars. The water rose so fast in their driveway that they couldn't move them to higher ground. Their Honda Civic was sitting in 4 feet of muddy water by sunrise, completely destroyed. Upstairs, their kids' bedrooms were flooded when the water found its way through the foundation walls. 8-year-old Maria's stuffed animal collection, ruined. 12-year-old Carlos's baseball card collection that he'd been building for 3 years, destroyed. I documented everything with my camera. Water levels, timestamps, damage patterns. I measured the flow rates and calculated exactly how much water my dam would have contained. The math was brutal, but simple. With proper retention, 78% of this flood damage would never have happened. By 6 a.m., the rain had stopped, but the damage was done. 3 families had flooded basements. 2 families lost cars. The Martinez house had water damage on the first floor that would require complete renovation. I walked through the neighborhood with my notebook, taking photos and talking to everyone who got hit. Total damage estimate, $127,000. Insurance would cover some of it, but flood insurance has deductibles and limits. Most of these families were looking at $10,000 to $20,000 in out-of-pocket costs for repairs and replacement. All because Patricia Kellerman destroyed a dam that had been protecting them for 15 years. I called Tom Brennan at 7 a.m. "Tom, we need to add flood damage to our lawsuit. Patricia's illegal demolition just cost my neighbors over $100,000. "Frank, slow down. Tell me exactly what happened." I walked him through the flooding, the damage, the measurements. Tom was quiet for a long time after I finished. Finally he said, "Frank, this changes everything. If we can prove her demolition directly caused this flooding, we're not talking about HOA overreach anymore. We're talking about destruction of property and massive civil liability." At 10 a.m., Patricia called an emergency HOA meeting. She sent out emails to everyone in the neighborhood claiming the flooding was caused by poor drainage planning by non-professional property owners, and demanding that I pay for all flood damage since my illegal Construction had made the flooding worse by redirecting water flow. I read her email 3 times, each time getting angrier. She was actually blaming me for the flood damage caused by her destroying my flood prevention system. It was like burning down someone's house and then billing them for fire damage. Jake Williams knocked on my door an hour after Patricia's email went out. He had a grim look on his face and a manila folder in his hand. "Frank, I've been making some calls about yesterday. That county condemnation order Patricia showed you? Completely fake. I called the real county engineering department. There's no David Walsh working there, no condemnation order was ever issued, and they have no record of any safety complaint about your dam." He opened the folder and showed me a printout from the county's online records system. "Your dam was properly permitted, properly inspected, and still listed as compliant in their database." Patricia forged that entire condemnation order. I stared at the papers, feeling something cold and hard settle in my stomach. She lied to the contractors, lied to the deputy, and destroyed my dam with fake paperwork. "Gets worse," Jake said. "I ran the plates on that white truck she had yesterday. It's registered to her brother-in-law's construction company. She hired her own family to tear down your dam using forged county documents." I looked out my window at Mrs. Chen's house, where volunteers were still hauling waterlogged furniture to the curb. At the Martinez place, where they were ripping out flooded drywall and insulation. At the muddy pile where my dam used to be, where 15 years of careful engineering had been destroyed by a woman with fake papers and a backhoe. "Jake," I said, "I think it's time we had a real close look at exactly who Patricia Kellerman is and what else she's been up to." Jake smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. "Frank, I was hoping you'd say that, because I've got some ideas about where to start digging." Tom Brennan called me Thursday morning with news that made my coffee taste better for the first time in weeks. "Frank, the county engineer wants to meet with you." I sent him your photos and measurements from the flood, along with Jake's evidence about the forged condemnation order. He's furious that someone used fake county documents to destroy permitted infrastructure. The meeting was set for Friday at 10 a.m. County engineer Robert Hayes turned out to be a guy about my age who'd worked flood control for 28 years. He looked at my original dam permits, my flood prevention records, and the photos of Patricia's destruction with the kind of professional anger I recognized from my own Army Corps days. "Mr. Morrison, your dam was textbook construction, proper soil analysis, correct drainage calculations, everything built to code and then some. Removing it without authorization wasn't just illegal, it was engineering malpractice." Hayes pulled out his own folder. "I've run the numbers on your flood data. That retention structure prevented major flooding 3 separate times. We should have been giving you an award, not watching some HOA president tear it down with fake paperwork." Hayes agreed to provide written testimony supporting my dam's effectiveness and legality. Better yet, he offered to personally inspect the flood damage and calculate exactly how much my dam would have prevented. "I'll stake my professional reputation on it. That woman destroyed critical flood infrastructure and caused predictable damage to multiple properties." Things were looking good until Hayes dropped the real bombshell. "There's something else you need to know, Mr. Morrison. I've been checking into this Patricia Kellerman and her HOA activities. Your dam isn't the only thing she's been targeting with questionable authority." Jake and I spent the weekend digging deeper into Patricia's background. What we found was a pattern of financial manipulation that made the dam destruction look like small potatoes. Jake's police contacts helped him access public records, and I contributed my engineer's eye for spotting things that didn't add up. Patricia had been elected HOA president 6 months ago after moving to Elm Street. Her first action was hiring her brother-in-law's construction company for emergency infrastructure maintenance at inflated prices. Tree removal that should have cost $800 was billed at $2,400. Sidewalk repairs that any handyman could do for $300 were charged at $1,200. Every invoice went to the same company, Kellerman Brothers Construction. The financial records showed $43,000 in HOA payments to Kellerman Brothers in 6 months. For a neighborhood that had needed maybe $5,000 in actual maintenance during the previous 5 years combined, Patricia was systematically looting the HOA treasury and using fake emergencies to justify it. Jake found the email trail on Tuesday. Patricia had been sloppy with her digital security, using the same password for multiple accounts. Her messages to her brother-in-law were brutally honest about their scheme: need to create more emergency maintenance issues. The damn thing is perfect, expensive to remove, easy to justify, and the old man can't stop us if we use county authority. Another email from 3 weeks earlier was even more damaging. Morrison's dam has been protecting property values for years, but if we remove it and cause some flood damage, property prices will drop. Perfect opportunity to buy low and flip high when I list the damaged houses. Patricia wasn't just embezzling HOA funds, she was planning to crash neighborhood property values, buy houses cheap from flood-damaged families, and resell them at huge profits after the flood problems were mysteriously solved by new flood control measures she'd arranged through her brother-in-law's company. I read those emails twice to make sure I understood the scope of her plan. Patricia had targeted me specifically because my dam was preventing the flooding she needed to manipulate the real estate market. She'd forged county documents, destroyed critical infrastructure, and caused over $100,000 in flood damage as part of a scheme to make money flipping houses. We had her dead to rights on multiple felonies: fraud, embezzlement, destruction of property, and conspiracy. Tom Brennan was practically salivating when I showed him the evidence. Frank, this isn't just a civil lawsuit anymore. This is a criminal enterprise. We're talking federal charges. Mrs. Chen, the Martinez family, and the other flood victims joined our expanded lawsuit against Patricia and the HOA. The case was looking bulletproof until Tom called me Wednesday evening with bad news. Frank, Patricia's lawyers filed for bankruptcy protection for the HOA. They're claiming the association can't pay damages because all the money was spent on legitimate maintenance contracts. They've also filed a restraining order against you, claiming you threatened Patricia during a phone call. I'd never threatened anyone in my life, and Patricia knew it. But the restraining order would prevent me from attending HOA meetings or gathering more evidence from neighbors. She was trying to isolate me legally while using bankruptcy to avoid paying for the damage she'd caused. There's worse news, Tom continued. Patricia's putting her house up for sale. If she completes the sale and leaves the state before we can get a judgment, collecting damages becomes a lot harder. Jake was already ahead of me when I called him. Frank, I've been watching her house. Moving trucks showed up this morning. She's not just planning to leave, she's actively packing up right now. I stood in my kitchen looking out at the muddy scar where my dam used to be, thinking about Mrs. Chen's flooded basement and the Martinez kids' destroyed bedrooms. Patricia had caused all that damage as part of a calculated scheme to steal money and manipulate property values. Now she was trying to escape responsibility by declaring bankruptcy and fleeing the state. Jake, I said, how long do we have before she's gone? Based on what I'm seeing, maybe 72 hours. Friday afternoon at the latest. 72 hours to stop a criminal from destroying evidence and disappearing with stolen money, while she hid behind fake bankruptcy papers and fraudulent restraining orders. I looked at the photo of Sarah on my kitchen counter, remembering what she used to say about people who hurt others for money. Frank, sometimes the system works, and sometimes you have to work the system. Time to work the system. Jake and I worked through the night like a couple of old soldiers on a mission that mattered. He had 30 years of detective experience and I had 40 years of engineering precision. And Patricia Kellerman was about to learn what happens when you corner two professionals who don't quit. Our first breakthrough came at 2 a.m. when Jake found the smoking gun in the state records database. Frank, look at this. Patricia never filed the proper incorporation paperwork for the HOA. According to state law, she's been operating an unregistered organization and has zero legal authority to collect fees, issue violations, or order any kind of property modifications. I stared at the computer screen, showing the empty search results. You mean she's been running a fake HOA this whole time? Not fake exactly, but legally meaningless. It's like someone declaring themselves mayor of a town that doesn't exist. All her authority, all her official-sounding demands, all her legal threats, completely worthless. Jake printed out the state records showing no valid HOA registration for Meadowbrook Hills. Every fee she collected, every violation she issued, every contract she signed was done without legal authority. At 4 a.m., I called Dr. Sarah Mitchell from the State University's Hydrology Department. Sarah had been my student 20 years ago and was now one of the top flood control engineers in the region. I apologized for the early hour and explained the situation. Professor Morrison, I remember your lectures on retention dam design. If someone destroyed properly engineered flood control infrastructure, the calculations would be straightforward. She agreed to drive over and inspect the damage site that morning. I'll bring my equipment and document everything. If your dam was preventing flood damage, like you say, the math will prove it beyond any doubt. Dr. Mitchell arrived at 7 a.m. with a graduate student and a truck full of survey equipment. They spent 3 hours measuring water flow patterns, soil composition, and drainage gradients. The calculations were devastating for Patricia's defense. Professor, your dam was preventing an average of 2.3 million gallons of runoff from entering the neighborhood storm system during major rainfall events. Removing it was guaranteed to cause flooding. Anyone with basic hydrology training would have known that. She agreed to provide expert testimony and document her findings in a formal engineering report. This wasn't just property destruction, Professor. This was environmental engineering malpractice that endangered public safety. Meanwhile, Jake was working his network of retired law enforcement contacts. His buddy Mike from the state police helped us access surveillance footage from traffic cameras near Patricia's house. What we found was better than Christmas morning. Clear video of Patricia personally directing the forged county document delivery, pointing at my dam while talking to the demolition crew, and filming the destruction with her personal phone. Frank, she documented her own crime. Look at this timestamp. She's recording the demolition at the exact moment her fake condemnation order is being executed. Jake enhanced the video to show Patricia's license plate and her face clearly visible. No jury in the world would believe she wasn't personally orchestrating this fraud. But Patricia was still packing to leave, and we were running out of time. Jake drove by her house Wednesday afternoon and reported moving trucks loading furniture. She's definitely planning to run, maybe 24 hours before she's gone. That evening, Jake made another discovery that changed everything. Frank, I found Patricia's insurance records. As a licensed real estate agent, she's required to carry errors and omissions insurance. That policy specifically covers fraudulent actions taken in the course of her professional duties. I didn't understand the significance until Jake explained it. She personally guaranteed the demolition contract as HOA president, which makes her individually liable for the damages. But more importantly, her insurance company will have to pay the claims, and they don't like being stuck with bills from criminal fraud. They'll go after her assets aggressively to recover their costs. The insurance angle gave us a new legal strategy, but we still had to serve papers before Patricia disappeared. Tom Brennan filed an emergency motion Thursday morning to freeze Patricia's assets and prevent her from leaving the state. We had to prove she was actively destroying evidence and planning to flee. Jake's surveillance paid off again. His photos showed Patricia making multiple trips to a commercial shredding company, carrying boxes of documents each time. She's destroying evidence as fast as she can. Bank records, contracts, probably all her communications with her brother-in-law. We tracked Patricia to Hartwell Realty offices Thursday afternoon, where she was apparently meeting with her house buyer's closing attorney. This was our chance to serve papers before the sale completed, and she had cash to disappear with. Jake and I sat in his pickup truck, across from the law office, waiting. At 3:15, Patricia's white Lexus pulled into the parking lot. She walked into the building carrying a briefcase and wearing the same smug expression she'd had while watching my dam get destroyed. Tom Brennan's process server was waiting in the lobby with a thick folder of legal papers. Emergency asset seizure, fraud charges, conspiracy allegations, and a restraining order preventing Patricia from completing any property sales or leaving the state. We watched through the window as Patricia emerged 20 minutes later, no longer smiling. She was shouting at someone on her phone, waving papers in the air. The house sale had been blocked at the last minute. Her buyer's attorney had backed out immediately upon learning about the pending lawsuits and criminal charges. Patricia sat in her car for 10 minutes, making frantic phone calls. Then she did something that told us everything we needed to know about her character. She drove straight to a storage facility and started loading boxes from a rental unit into her car. Jake snapped photos of everything. She's retrieving hidden evidence, documents she stashed away in case something like this happened. But Patricia had made one final, fatal mistake. In her panic to gather evidence and flee, she'd forgotten that storage facilities have security cameras. Jake's law enforcement contacts got us the surveillance footage showing Patricia storing boxes of HOA records in a private unit 6 weeks ago, right after she'd started her demolition planning. Those boxes contained the original contracts, the real financial records, and communications that proved the entire fraud conspiracy. Patricia had literally documented her own crimes and then stored the evidence where we could find it. As we watched Patricia speed away from the storage facility, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Sarah died. The satisfaction of a complex engineering problem finally coming together. Every piece of evidence fitted perfectly with every other piece. The math was clean, the documentation was complete, and the solution was inevitable. Patricia Kellerman was about to learn what happens when you try to outsmart people who actually know what they're doing. Friday morning brought the worst news yet. My flood insurance claim was denied. The letter arrived certified mail, just like Patricia's original HOA demand, but this one hit me like a punch to the gut. Claim denied due to intentional destruction of flood prevention infrastructure. Damage resulting from deliberate acts is not covered under standard flood insurance policies. $89,000 in unrecovered damages. My house foundation had shifted during the flooding, requiring structural repairs that my regular homeowner's insurance wouldn't touch. The basement waterproofing system I'd installed 15 years ago was destroyed and needed complete replacement. Even my lawn and landscaping were ruined by the muddy water that had sat for days after Patricia's demolition. I called the insurance company and got transferred 4 times before reaching someone who could explain their decision. Mr. Morrison, when a flood prevention structure is intentionally removed and flooding occurs as a predictable result, that constitutes an intentional act under insurance law. We can't pay claims for deliberately caused damage. But I didn't remove it. Someone else destroyed my dam illegally. Sir, our investigation shows you were in a legal dispute over the structure when it was removed. The removal was related to that dispute. We consider that intentional causation, regardless of who physically performed the demolition. Tom Brennan said the insurance company's position was legally weak, but would take months to fight in court. Frank, they're hoping you'll give up and go away rather than spend years in litigation. It's a common tactic with expensive claims. I was facing bankruptcy to pay for damage caused by Patricia's criminal fraud while she was trying to escape with stolen HOA money and avoid responsibility through legal technicalities. The system wasn't working fast enough to stop her. Then Jake found the document that changed everything. He came to my house Friday afternoon carrying a manila folder and wearing the biggest grin I'd seen since this whole nightmare started. Frank, remember how Patricia personally guaranteed that demolition contract? I found a copy in her storage unit documents. She signed as both HOA president and individual guarantor, which means she's personally liable for all damages if the contract was obtained through fraud. I looked at the contract signature page. Patricia had indeed signed twice, once as Patricia Kellerman, HOA president, and again as Patricia Kellerman, individual guarantor. The contract specifically stated that the individual guarantor would be personally responsible for all costs and damages if the work authorization was invalid. Jake, what does this mean practically? It means her house is collateral for the demolition contract. If we can prove the contract was obtained through fraudulent documents, FSS, which we can, then her personal assets are at risk, regardless of any HOA bankruptcy. Jake flipped through more papers. Better yet, her real estate license requires maintaining errors and omissions insurance that specifically covers fraudulent actions taken in the course of professional duties. The insurance angle was brilliant. Patricia had been acting as a real estate agent when she developed her scheme to crash property values and flip houses. Her professional insurance would have to cover damages resulting from her fraudulent activities. But insurance companies don't like paying for criminal acts. They go after Patricia personally to recover their costs. But we still had to move fast. Jake's surveillance showed Patricia was making final preparations to leave town. She'd arranged for her furniture to go into storage and had been spotted at the bank making large withdrawals. Tom Brennan filed an emergency motion Friday evening to attach Patricia's house as security for our damage claims. The motion included Dr. Mitchell's engineering report, Jake's surveillance evidence, the storage unit documents, and the personal guarantee contract. Judge Martinez agreed to an emergency hearing Saturday morning. Patricia showed up to court with her own attorney, a nervous-looking guy in an expensive suit who clearly hadn't had time to review all the evidence. Patricia herself looked haggard and desperate, nothing like the smug woman who'd watched my dam get destroyed. The hearing was a disaster for Patricia's side. Her attorney tried to argue that the HOA bankruptcy protected her from personal liability, but Judge Martinez quickly shot that down. Counselor, your client personally guaranteed this contract. Bankruptcy doesn't void personal guarantees, especially when they were obtained through fraudulent means. Dr. Mitchell testified about the engineering analysis, explaining in simple terms how removing my dam guaranteed the flooding that followed. Your Honor, any competent engineer would have predicted this exact damage pattern. Miss Kellerman's actions weren't just negligent. They were predictably catastrophic. Jake presented the surveillance evidence showing Patricia directing the demolition and filming the destruction. The storage unit documents proved she'd been planning this scheme for months and had systematically destroyed evidence afterward. But the moment that sealed Patricia's fate came when Judge Martinez asked her directly about the forged county condemnation order. Miss Kellerman, did you present a county condemnation document to justify this demolition? Patricia's attorney whispered something to her, but she was too angry to listen. Your Honor, that dam was illegal and dangerous. I had every right to remove it for public safety. Ma'am, that's not what I asked. Did you present a document claiming to be from the county engineering department? The contractors needed proper authorization. Miss Kellerman, yes or no? Did you present a county document to authorize this demolition? Patricia looked around the courtroom like a trapped animal. Her attorney was shaking his head frantically, but she'd already committed to her story. Yes, Your Honor, I provided the necessary county documentation. Judge Martinez held up Jake's evidence packet. Miss Kellerman, the county has confirmed this document was forged. The signature is fake, the letterhead is unauthorized, and no such condemnation order was ever issued. You just admitted under oath to using fraudulent government documents. The courtroom went dead quiet. Patricia's attorney put his head in his hands. I watched Patricia's face go white as she realized she'd just confessed to federal document fraud on the court record. Judge Martinez granted our motion to attach Patricia's house and froze her bank accounts pending resolution of the damage claims. He also referred the case to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. Patricia broke down completely. As the bailiff led her out, she was screaming about how this was all unfair, how she'd only been trying to improve the neighborhood, how I was the real criminal for building an unauthorized dam. But as I watched her being escorted away, I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Patricia was cornered now, facing criminal charges and financial ruin. Desperate people do desperate things, and I had a feeling she wasn't done fighting yet. Jake walked over as the courtroom cleared out. "Frank, we won, but I don't trust her. She's got nothing left to lose now." He was right. Patricia Kellerman was about to discover what happens when you push a retired Army engineer too far, and I suspected she was going to make one final, dangerous mistake. The trial started 3 weeks later on a cold Monday morning in November. I sat in the front row behind Tom Brennan's table, watching Patricia enter the courtroom with her new attorney, a slick-looking criminal defense lawyer from the city, who probably cost more per hour than most people make in a week. Patricia had lost weight and looked older, but her eyes still held that same arrogant glint that had gotten her into this mess. Judge Harrison called the court to order and asked both sides if they were ready to proceed. Tom stood up confidently and announced we were ready. Patricia's attorney, David Chen, no relation to my neighbor, asked for additional time to review evidence, but the judge denied the request. "Counselor, your client has had 3 weeks to prepare. We're proceeding today." The prosecution went first, laying out Patricia's crimes with the precision of a military operation. Federal prosecutor Sarah Williams presented the forged county documents, the embezzlement evidence, and the conspiracy charges like she was building a dam herself, one solid piece of evidence at a time, creating something that couldn't be torn down. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Patricia Kellerman didn't just steal money from her neighbors. She systematically destroyed critical infrastructure, forged government documents, and caused over $100,000 in predictable flood damage as part of a calculated scheme to manipulate property values for personal profit. Williams played the surveillance video of Patricia directing the demolition, showed the forged condemnation order, and presented the email trail proving Patricia knew exactly what she was doing. The jury watched Patricia on screen, smiling and filming while my 15-year-old dam was destroyed by her brother-in-law's equipment. Dr. Mitchell took the stand and explained the hydrology in terms anyone could understand. Mr. Morrison's dam was textbook flood control engineering. Removing it was guaranteed to cause the exact flooding that occurred 3 days later. Any competent engineer would have predicted this result. Dr. Mitchell, in your professional opinion, was this flooding preventable? Absolutely. Mr. Morrison's retention structure would have contained 96% of the runoff that flooded those homes. The damage was entirely predictable and entirely preventable. Jake testified about the investigation, walking the jury through Patricia's pattern of embezzlement and fraud. He presented bank records showing $43,000 in suspicious payments to her brother-in-law's company, the fake HOA registration documents, and the storage unit evidence that proved premeditation. Detective Williams, what did you conclude about Miss Kellerman's actions? This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was a carefully planned criminal enterprise designed to steal HOA money and manipulate property values through fraudulent means. She forged government documents, destroyed critical infrastructure, and caused predictable damage to advance her scheme. When I took the stand, Tom walked me through the technical details of my dam construction, the permits I'd obtained, and the flood prevention records I'd maintained for 15 years. I explained how Patricia's destruction had caused the flooding, and why her claims about safety concerns were technically impossible. Mr. Morrison, did you ever threaten Miss Kellerman? No, sir. I'm an engineer. I solve problems with math and evidence, not threats. What was your reaction when your dam was destroyed? I looked at Patricia, sitting at the defense table with her arms crossed. I was angry that 15 years of work was destroyed by someone who had no idea what she was doing. But mostly, I was worried about my neighbors. I knew exactly what would happen when the next storm hit. Patricia's attorney tried to paint her as a concerned citizen trying to protect the neighborhood from a dangerous structure, but his case fell apart under cross-examination. Dr. Mitchell had already testified that my dam was perfectly safe and properly engineered. County Engineer Hayes confirmed that all permits were valid and no safety concerns had ever been raised. The defense's supposed expert witness, a civil engineer Patricia had hired to support her safety claims, was destroyed on cross-examination when Tom Brennan revealed the man had been sanctioned by the state licensing board for providing false testimony in previous cases. Sir, isn't it true that you've never actually designed or built a retention dam? Well, no, but I understand the principles. And isn't it true that you were paid $15,000 by Miss Kellerman to provide this testimony? I was compensated for my time, yes. And isn't it true that the State Engineering Board has previously found you guilty of providing false expert testimony for money? The fake expert's credibility evaporated completely. Tom presented the board's disciplinary records, showing the man had been caught lying under oath in 3 previous cases, always in exchange for large payments. When Patricia finally took the stand in her own defense, it was like watching someone deliberately walk into a wood chipper. She tried to claim she'd been protecting the neighborhood from my unauthorized and dangerous dam. But Prosecutor Williams had the receipts for everything. Miss Kellerman, you testified that you were concerned about public safety, correct? Yes, that dam was a hazard. But you never contacted the county engineering department about safety concerns, did you? Well, I thought the HOA could handle it. Miss Kellerman, you forged a county condemnation order. Yes or no? Patricia's attorney objected, but Judge Harrison overruled. The defendant will answer the question. Patricia fidgeted in her chair, looking around the courtroom like she was searching for an escape route. I provided the necessary documentation to protect the community. That's not what I asked. Did you forge a document claiming to be from the county engineering department? Long pause. Patricia knew she was trapped. She'd already admitted this under oath in the previous hearing. The contractors needed proper authorization. Miss Kellerman, yes or no? Did you create a fake county document? Another long pause. Finally, barely audible. Yes. The courtroom was dead silent. Patricia had just confessed to federal document fraud in front of 12 jurors and a federal judge. Williams pressed her advantage. And you destroyed Mr. Morrison's dam knowing it would cause flooding, correct? I thought? I didn't think it would be that bad. Miss Kellerman, you're a real estate agent. You sent emails discussing how flood damage would lower property values so you could buy houses cheap and resell them at higher prices. You planned this flooding, didn't you? Patricia broke down completely. He wouldn't listen. He wouldn't pay the fees. He thought he was better than everyone else with his engineering degrees and his permits. I was trying to teach him that I had authority too. Her attorney was frantically signaling her to stop talking, but Patricia was past caring. He made me look stupid in front of the whole neighborhood. Someone had to show him who was in charge. Judge Harrison called for order as Patricia continued ranting. I worked for 6 months to get elected HOA president. I had plans for this neighborhood. He ruined everything with his stubborn attitude and his perfect little dam. The jury had heard enough. After 4 hours of deliberation, they returned guilty verdicts on all counts: fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and federal document forgery. Judge Harrison scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. Patricia got 3 years in federal prison, full restitution to all flood victims, and her real estate license was permanently revoked. The court ordered her house sold to pay damages, with the proceeds going to Mrs. Chen, the Martinez family, and the other affected neighbors. But the real victory came 6 months later when the county approached me about rebuilding my dam as an official flood control structure. They offered to fund construction and ongoing maintenance in exchange for incorporating it into the county's stormwater management system. Mrs. Chen was elected as the new HOA president by unanimous vote. Her first official act was dissolving the old HOA and reforming it with proper bylaws, elected oversight, and strict financial controls to prevent future Patricia Kellermans. The day we dedicated the new dam, the whole neighborhood showed up. Mrs. Chen gave a speech about community protection and proper leadership, Jake joked that Patricia had found the only thing harder than my dam, federal prison walls. I stood looking at the bigger, better retention structure, thinking about Sarah and how proud she would have been. We'd protected our community from more than just floods. We'd protected it from people who abuse power for personal gain. Patricia Kellerman had learned the hard way what happens when you mess with an engineer who knows how to build things that last.